Okay, so this is our Photoshop lesson here. Photoshop does way more than we will cover. It's a very robust program, does a lot of stuff. We're just going to try to cover the basics so that we can do this project. But there's going to be a lot of things we skip over just because we don't have the time and just because it's not stuff you need to know. Um, Essentially, when you open up Photoshop, you will see, this is all left over from last period, sorry. You're going to see something like this, right? It's just a blank screen. Um, Hopefully you guys have made sure that Photoshop works on your computers already. If you haven't, the way to access it is you go over here to the Start menu, over here where all the programs are listed. This is all alphabetical, and Photoshop is in the first section, and under the A's, go to Adobe Photoshop, right there. You should be able to click right on that and have Photoshop start right up. If it doesn't, if it gives you a dialog box saying that you need to log in with your Adobe ID or you need to create an account or anything like that, that is wrong, and you probably need updates added to your computer, which stars can do. Okay? Um, but you should be able to open it right up like this. Now, you will need to access Photoshop, but also access the L drive. Do you guys remember that from when we did the Stipple project, how you had to go to the L drive to get your photo? All right, so I have on the L drive a folder called HappyBox Image Resources. Inside are all the files that I'm going to use for this demo, as well as some things that you might find useful, like a folder full of just random logos like McDonald's and SpongeBob and Pokemon, I don't know, as well as logos for other stuff. Okay, let's go back up. Also, a folder full of fonts that you can install on your computer. So if you want a comic style font or some other cool stuff, you can install those to your computer. So this is a very handy folder to have. So the most important thing, though, is down here towards the bottom, you'll see this file called template. That is the file that you are actually going to build your box from. So every single one of you needs your own individual copy of this folder. You don't want to just open this up and start changing it, because this is like the master copy of all the files, okay? You don't want to mess with anything in here. You don't even need to open this folder. I just opened it to show you what was in it. All you need to do is go to the L drive, which is located right down here, this little manila folder. I'll close this out so you can see it. With a little letter A in front of it. See, if you hover over it, it says student lessons, just like that. If you click on this, you should see that list of folders with teacher names, last name, and then first name. Scroll down alphabetically till you get to K, Kemple. Go to that HappyBox Image Resources folder, right click on it, and go to Copy. That copies it to the clipboard. Now you go somewhere, anywhere, I don't care, to your computer. As long as it's on your computer, I don't care. Desktop, your documents, wherever you go to get your stuff on your computers. I want you to right click again and hit paste. And that will paste the folder, which I have right here. That will post your own copy of that folder to your computer. Then you can open up that folder and open up your own local copy of this in Photoshop. Once you have Photoshop open, you have two different ways to bring files into it, to open things up. You can either go to File, Open, which is the traditional way, and then find, go to your desktop, then find the folder. There it is, Happy Box Image Resources. You can open it that way, or I can double click on that, find whatever file I want and open it. Ba-boom. Or if you have Photoshop open and you have the folder, the containing folder open, you can literally just bring it on top like this and click and drag the file over like that. Either way. Now, when you open up folders, or files, rather, in Photoshop, you are going to see something like this, where they're anchored to the top, and you can only see one image at a time. If you want to see more than one image at once, like side by side, simply left click and drag this down slightly from the top, unanchor it, and then you can have floating windows, which is what I prefer. And then, like, whenever you click on a window, it will come forward. If you ever want to resize these windows, is Control Alt plus or minus will make the windows bigger or smaller. Okay? So now we have our clean template, blank, and it's showing all your four sides of your box spread out, unfolded, like you had your box unassembled. So as I mentioned yesterday, your job is to be the designer, and you're going to choose a theme. Doesn't matter what, it's whatever you want to do. Think about your target audience, and then you are going to design a box, all four sides, with activities, images, text, all kinds of content. When you are designing something, before you do anything in Photoshop, you're going to do what? What did I say yesterday? I'm sorry? Yes, do thumbnail sketches on paper first, in your sketchbook or wherever, and just play around with composition and alignment and arranging elements and stuff like that. Just brainstorm on paper. So that way you can have your sketches right next to you, and then you can start bringing in assets and logos and start making it match your sketches. All right. Now, I will review the Photoshop stuff I kind of been doing it a little differently this year. Before, I would just kind of do each menu one at a time and go through each thing, button by button. But I'm kind of doing things a little more all over the place this year. In some ways that's better, in some ways it's not. But anyway, we'll get through it all. So, whenever you're designing something like this, I think it's helpful to try to design it from background to foreground. All right, so think about almost like when you're doing a drawing or something, and you're drawing the stuff in the background first, and then you're gradually drawing the stuff that's in front of it. So it's almost like, think about like a stack of papers that are stacked on top of each other. That's kind of how your layers in Photoshop are, right? So you may or may not see this layers menu open in Photoshop. This thing over here. This is the one window you should have open. So if you see this and you don't see anything over here on the right hand side, go to Window, and if nothing else, check Layers. It's also the F7 key. And this is important. Okay, so really quickly, up top are your function menus. So file, edit, image. This is where you do all of your opening and saving and some of your editing of elements like rotating and scaling up and down, making it bigger and smaller, adjusting the color and the contrast, creating new layers, duplicating layers, merging them together, adjusting your selections, etc. All right, so that's what this top row is for, and we'll kind of deal with some of those individually as we go along. I think it's going to make more sense if I just sort of briefly give you an overview and then come back to it later. On the left-hand side is your toolbar, which you've used some of before. And each of these is just a different button, and they're kind of organized by what they do, by function. So the first tool is always going to be the Move tool. Now it's bundled with something called the Artboard tool, which I don't really use, so I'm not going to go over that. But the Move tool is basically just it moves elements around. So let's say I've got Plastic Man over here on my box. If I get the Move tool, I can move him around wherever I want. I just click and hold it, and then drag the mouse and move it around. Notice that when I brought him over, it created a new layer. See that layer 1? The reason why I am able to drag him independently is because he's on a separate layer. If he was on the same layer as the background, they'd all be merged together and I wouldn't be able to move it. So whenever you do anything new in your file, it's really important to put it on a new layer. Now, sometimes Photoshop does that automatically. Like anytime I move an image over or anytime I paste something in to an image, it's going to automatically put it on a new layer, which is helpful. But sometimes it won't. All right, so that's the Move tool. It just moves stuff around. You just move elements where you want them. The next three are the selection tools. Now, each of these does the same thing, but in a different way. So notice right now, it might be hard to tell, but you see how Plastic Man has this like white background behind him? Like it's covering up the line art? I don't like that. I want to get rid of it. I just want him by himself. I want him cut out. Because if I put another color behind here, let me quickly duplicate this layer. Get the magic wand and select this area and then fill it with a color. Now go back up to Plaz, as he's called. You see that white around him? I want to get rid of it. A few ways I can do that. I could get the eraser tool down here and just start erasing around him, but man, that's going to be really difficult, especially when I get into here and I want to start going around his head and my hand slips and I start erasing some of his hair, and you know what I mean, and I can't get a clean even line, and it's all just time consuming and hard, and I slip and go oops and I erase part of his face, and I don't want to do that. So the eraser tool is not a good idea. So what I could do instead, which is the smarter move, is use one of these selection tools to select the white and then delete it. But which one should I use? The first one is the marquee tool, and that one will create a big selection that's either rectangular or oval shaped. And if I click and drag, I can see how I can kind of change the shape of it. I still have the mouse button held down. I can kind of scale it the way I want it to and then let go. And now it's selected. If I click inside the selection and hold down the mouse button, I can move the selection around where I need to. But here's the problem. There's no area in here that's like a perfect square. The best I can do is get it like really close and then hit delete. But see, I've still got extra stuff there on the sides. So it's not ideal. And I could sit here and try to go in there and keep selecting something 100 times, but it's really kind of a pain. So the marquee tool is not going to really work very well for this. Also keep in mind that if I hold down Shift, I can add to any selection, like so. You see those little marching ants? That means that I've got a selection active. If I hold down the Alt key, it takes away from the selection. I just click and drag, okay? Now, having a selection active means that all Photoshop cares about is what's inside the selection. So if I get like my brush tool and I start coloring, see how it's only coloring what's inside the selection? That's all that means. Make that brush smaller. So the next selection tool is the lasso tool, and that's where I can basically create a freehand selection, come back to where I started, close it off. So I can do that, but again, it's similar in the sense that it's not perfect. Like it's still going to take me a long time to really clean that up and get it looking the way I want it to. Let me go back to the other layer. Bundled with that is the polygonal lasso, which is similar, but it uses a series of straight lines like that. Now, again, you get a little more control than the other lasso, but it's still not great. So let's go down here. Let's try the magic wand. Now the magic wand selects pixels based on either color or whether or not they're inside a border, like a closed border or outline. So because I have a nice flat even color in the background, if I click on that, you see how it selects all the white immediately? That's what I want. Now if I hold down Shift, I can continue clicking on other white areas in this image. Now all I have to do is hit the delete key and boom, look at that. That's what I want. It's nice and clean, no white stuff, okay? This is good. So in that particular instance, the best way to select was to use the magic wand because I had a nice flat color behind here. And I actually lucked out. If you go back and look at all the reference images I have in here, I found a lot of images that had white backgrounds. And that's really the ideal scenario. But you're not going to always have the ideal scenario. Let's try a different one. I have Robin right here. And let's say I want to separate Robin kicking Two-Face in the face. And I want to put that on my box without the background. Well, let's try that magic wand again. It worked really well last time. And let's start clicking. Oh, look, you see how it's only clicking one color at a time? Because that's how it identifies selections. Now I could hold down Shift and I could continue to select things, but it's really cumbersome to have to make this many clicks to select something. And see, sometimes it bleeds out into other parts, like if two dark colors are touching each other, the selection will bleed out into other parts of the image, and I don't want that. So this is a case where, you know what, even the magic wand isn't going to help me. But bundled with the magic wand is the quick selection tool. This tool will create a gradually growing selection without even having to hold down Shift, and it works much better. You see how it's selecting the entire region around where I click? And it's much easier to just select areas. Now, it's still not perfect. Sometimes you get a situation where you've got to zoom in and clean stuff up or use another selection tool. Like, let's zoom in on the hair. See, there's that little sliver of hair that it's not really catching. Even if I take my brush size down, it's not doing a great job of. I can hold down Alt and try to get some of that, and it's doing okay. But really, if I want to clean this up, what I need to do is switch to my polygonal lasso. The nice thing about these selection tools is you can switch back and forth between them. If I hold down Shift now, I can go in and make a much cleaner selection around those little spiky hairs of Robin. Go back around. There we go. So then, you know, little areas here and there, I can go in and clean up the selection. See, it missed that part there. I can again hold down Shift, put a straight line down, come back around to where I started. You'll see the little cursor change from a plus to a circle. That means that I found, see right there? That means that I found the endpoint. Okay. So with a little bit of work, I mean, I could clean that up more. To go back to quick selection, I forgot to get his hand there. So it still takes a little time, but it's not nearly as bad as the magic wand or the marquee tools. Once I think I've got everything that I need, then I simply hit Control C, go to Control V, and there's my Robin. Now, why is Robin so much smaller than Plastic Man when I bring him over? Because he is much lower res, right? Did you see how chunky this image was when I zoomed in on it? I mean, that's pretty, look at that. It's like a staircase, right? We go to image size, we'll see that our resolution is like 100, which isn't great. You generally want to have like I said in the beginning, like about 300 DPI for your images. Now, you're probably not going to find that on Google. A lot of images you find on the web are low res, but you just have to do the best you can with it. From far away, it doesn't look bad. So I guess what I would say is if they're really low res images, just don't blow them up really big on your box. Like keep them kind of small and they won't be as noticeable. All right, so that's basically, in a nutshell, the three selection tools and what they do. The marquee, the lassos, and the wands, the magic wand and quick selection. Okay. By the way, if you hover your cursor over any of these tools, you will get a quick description of what they do. So he moves a selection layer, Channel marquee makes a selection in the shape of a rectangle, so that'll help you if you're in a pinch. The crop tool, you don't really need to know how to use that because it's going to crop your whole image, and you don't want to do that. So there, it's kind of showing you what you do. You just slide it, and it'll crop the entire file, the entire image to that selection. Okay. The next one is the eyedropper tool, and that's basically a color sample tool. Down here on the lower left-hand corner, the very bottom of the toolbar, you see these two little colored boxes. Those represent your foreground and background colors. And this little curved arrow here that I'm clicking kind of switches between the back and forth of them. See how it goes from purple to red, purple to red. If you double click on these squares, you'll bring up your color picker, and you can drag to a different color family and control the lightness and darkness or the saturation of that color. It shows you the current versus the new color. And once you have chosen something you like, you just hit OK. And now that color becomes your new foreground color that you can paint with and use. Every time you want to change colors, you can select the color picker. But the nice thing about this eyedropper tool is if you have a specific color you want, like you're doing something, and let's say you want a color match, and you're like, oh man, I don't know what it is about this this flesh color, but I want to match this flesh color on something else I'm doing. You simply click with the eyedropper tool, and now see on my background how it turned to that flesh color. Now I have that flesh color, and I can use it. So it's nice to be able to sample colors. And like a lot of times when I'm coloring like my comics stuff that I do for fun, I will sample colors from like photographs if I want like a more natural palette. So in that way, I'm not using super bright, garish colors. I can sample from nature and get more naturalistic colors when I'm coloring. So the eyedropper tool is pretty useful. The healing and spot healing brushes, I'm not really gonna mess with those. You don't really need to know them. They just basically bring back parts of an image that have been modified back to its original state, but you won't really need that. The next tool down is the pencil tool mixed with the brush tool. That basically just gives you like a painting, like a paintbrush kind of a tool. So you just kind of mess around with that. Now, right now, you see how soft the edges are? It's almost like an airbrush. That's because I have this soft brush selected up here. This menu, by the way, changes, like this little second bar down here. See how when I click on a different tool, all those icons change? That's because these are the options for each tool. And so when you change the tool, the options change as well. So this is where you can like change the parameters of your tools or change your brush size or something like that. So if I change to a hard brush now, see how different that is between the two? Very crisp edge and a very soft edge. Okay. Now the brush tool has more fancy parameters to them. You can change the hardness, which is kind of like the edge, the crispness of the edge. There's also all these little things on here where you can make your edges look like charcoal or chalk or paint or some other kinds of stuff. That's for more advanced Photoshop users, though. But you can certainly play around. See, there's wet media brushes where you can make things look like watercolor or some other kind of a paint. You're more than welcome to play around, but I'm not going to require that you mess with that. It's just if you feel like it. Okay, moving right along. The next one down is the clone stamp tool. This is a fun one. All right, so let's say I want to make Plastic Man look like he's stretching. I'm going to zoom in here. And I'm going to stretch out his neck. So the first thing I'm going to do, well, let's make sure I'm on the right layer. I've got to be on the layer that Plastic Man is on. By the way, if I want to learn that, if I have the Move tool selected, I can right-click on any part of this, and it's going to give me a listing of all the layers that are underneath where I clicked. So see here, layer 1, layer 2, background copy. That's every layer listed. So if I go to layer 1, which is the first one listed, boom, it takes me right to layer 1, and that is, in fact, where Plastic Man is. So that's handy. Like if right now it's not that bad because I've only got a few layers, but like imagine you've got this image that has like, 50 or 75 or 100 layers in it. It's going to be really hard to determine which one is which if you haven't been naming them. So you can get the Move tool, right click, and find out right away where it is, and it'll take you right to it. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my selection tool. I'm going to use the polygonal lasso, and I am going to, I don't need to be worried about the top of his head. The bottom is where I have to really make the selection close to the line, like that. Now I'm going to move this up a little bit. All right, so now I'm using the Move tool, and it's only selecting the head because that's the only thing that I have selected. So I want to make it look like his neck is stretching. One thing I can do is use the clone stamp. If I go down here and I hit Alt, see how my cursor changes to like a little crosshair? I'm going to left click down here on his skin, and I'm just going to start coloring like that. Oops, that's too much. You can also make the brush a little smaller if you need to. Now I'm going to do it again. You got to kind of be careful to even this up. And if you look closely, you'll see that if you hit Alt and let go, you see how it's displaying what I clicked on inside the cursor? So that way you can kind of line up your edges like you need to get a straight line. It's not the neatest thing in the world. It takes a little practice. So it's going to take a little bit of cleanup here. I'm going to go in and clean this edge up. because this color is so flat, I could even take the brush tool and just select that flat peach color, that skin color. Oops. And just do this. Now I can take his head that I had selected before, and I'll scooch it down a little bit. Get the move tool again. Now he's got kind of a longer neck, right? Not perfect. I still need to clean some of this up on the edges. But it's a really handy tool. Another thing you can do is just, like, let's say I want to take out some of these windows on the building or add more bricks back here. I can select another part of this and like make this brick longer or something. Why it's not doing that now? That's weird. Or, you know, sometimes you can now he's got 2 R's, right? You know, give people 3 eyes or something. I don't know. Like add a 3rd window to the building. I don't know why it's not doing that though. See, now sometimes it's letting me and then sometimes it's not. What's going on with that? That's weird. I don't know. I'll have to figure it out. Anyway, you get the gist of the clone stamp. All right. So, any questions so far? No? Okay. All right. So, just continuing to move down the toolbar here. The history brush tool, don't worry about it. Eraser tool does just what it says. It erases like so. Again, it's erasing Plastic Man because that's the layer I'm on. You can adjust this just like a brush, make it bigger or smaller. The cool thing about it too is you can change the opacity and like take it down to, you know, like 30 or 20 something. And then just kind of gradually push things back, make it kind of semi-transparent. Sometimes on the edges of things, that's cool. But, you know, don't know how much use you'd have for that, but anyway, the eraser tool is just one way to erase something in addition to just selecting and deleting it. All right, the next one down is the gradient tool, and I think I'll have just enough time to do this before we end. Okay, the gradient tool will fill an area with 2 colors. So let me pick 2 colors here. I'll go with a red, and for my background color, I will go with a blue. Okay. I'm going to select an area to do this in. Because right now, if I do my gradient tool, watch what happens. Just going to click and drag that. My entire image has been covered. Why? Because I did not pay attention to what layer I was doing this on. Right? So I'm going to undo this. And let's say I want to just fill the gradient with this one on this one side of my box. I need to select that side. Again, I'll probably want to use my magic wand because all of these things are in a nice clean outline. But I need to be on the correct layer to do that. So I need to go back down to my background copy where the template actually is and click on it. And there, now I have that face selected. Now I need to go back to a different layer or create a new layer. And if I just simply select the gradient tool and drag it, it's going to add a gradient in the direction that I drag it. So if I drag diagonally like this, it's going to do my foreground and background colors with a blend in the middle. If I go up and down, it'll do it up and down, down and up. If I drag past the boundaries, it will stretch it out further. If I just do a really short one, it'll be like that. So for a background or something, you might want to think about doing a simple gradient, okay? So that's basically that. I think now is a good place to stop, unless anyone has any questions about what we've done so far. Like I said, we will continue this on Monday and a little bit into the next couple of days after that. I think we should be done with this by Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest, and then you guys will be able to start doing your thing. So your homework for the weekend, in addition to working on your figure drawing, which is due on Friday, a week from today, is just start thinking about what you want to do for your theme. All right, you don't have to do any major work, just start thinking about it. And if you make a decision, start seeing if you can look on Google or something and start compiling reference. Remember, this can be a theme that you make up yourself. You can create your own theme, your own characters, etc. All right, you don't have to make a decision by Monday, but I just want you to start thinking about it.